Hey everyone, what's a NeoNephos? It could be Europe's Declaration of Independence. You're watching Techstrong, gang. Hey everyone, it's me, Alan Schimmel. We're here at London KubeCon for a special edition of the Techstrong gang. So we've pulled together a special edition of the gang. Let me introduce you quickly to who we've got here. I don't have to go around the country today. They're all right here in person at my table. From the far left, you may not recognize him without any guitars. He is our, what is he? He's our Futurum VP analyst for DevOps. Mitch Ashley. Hey, Mitchell.
Good to be here.
Good to have you here.
Representing the Mile High.
Representing the Mile High. The Mile High in London. It's not legal here, Mitch. Be careful.
Good thing you told me that.
Yep. Next to Mitchell, he's watching the Yankee game on tape delay here, but he's our Chief Content Officer, Mike Vizard. Not happy. Yankees dropped 2 in a row.
Trying to figure out what this Rounders stuff is all about.
Yeah, okay. It's the torpedo bats. Next to Mike, he's usually at home in Austin, but he's also here live in London. VI, Principal Analyst, CTO, and Futurum Analyst, Guy Currier. Hey,
That's
Guy.
a lot of titles. Good to be
I gave
here.
you a lot of titles.
Yeah, representing Open Carry here in London.
Open carry in London. They don't have open carry in London. The police don't even have. Between you and him, we're going to need to hire send guns, lawyers, and money.
Well, I think they circled us all up together, corralled us, see if we get out of the country or not.
I'm afraid after my shift says they're waiting for me when I get the passport on the way home.
Exactly. It's not so much getting out as getting back.
Yeah, I may wind up in El Salvador or back on a plane back.
I think our van is waiting for us.
Jeez. I hope make sure there's no masked men or anything. Anyway. Look, I teased this NeoNephos.
NeoNephos.
Mike, what are we talking about?
So the Linux Foundation Europe, which is an arm of the Linux Foundation in the U.S.
I feel compelled to say it's an independent subsidiary that is based in Europe without U.S. connections.
Or at least oversight.
Yes.
But anyway, they launched yet another foundation that they're calling the NeoNephos Foundation, which is committed to helping organizations build their own data sovereign IT platforms, or a cloud, as you might say, using open source technologies. And it's being led mainly by at least the 2 names you might recognize are SAP and Deutsche Telekom. And the whole goal of this thing is to ensure independence, as you said, and no dependency on any other country for technology. And I can't help but wonder if this is the first shot that will be heard around the world, and we'll be seeing more of this.
I think this is a clean room version of a stack and of companies that are based here on the continent and on this side of the pond that will not be subject to any American tariffs or export controls. And if you are Europe, I watched Ursula van whatever. She's the head of the EU, chief officer of the EU. Ursula van, I forget her name. But it's clear if the U.S. is going to, and not the whole U.S., if the U.S. administration is going to push this tariff issue, the Europeans are going to do what they have to do to be independent. And I will remind you that from a population point of view, it's very close in size to the U.S. From a GP, not GPR.
Gross national
GDP.
GDP point of view, if you add it all up, it's not the U.S., but it's still a sizable block. And I don't blame them for doing this. I think this is a prudent move on their part.
I think, Guy, that everybody's going to wind up doing this, but how far will it go? I mean, will New York City declare its own stack and say, I don't want any components from Florida?
Well, right. So
I wouldn't
sovereign
blame them
clouds,
either.
sovereign clouds have been around for a while.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. My initial take on this was not quite the geopolitical one yours is, but I think you're onto something. Why? Well, so sovereign clouds have been around for a while. In fact, Oracle in particular has been building sovereign clouds for various countries, or for healthcare in, healthcare regions, that sort of thing, for quite some time. What's really interesting here is seeing this sovereign concept or these sovereign architectures come into a very open source, very collaborative, very, let's say, democratically oriented community. That is significant. I don't know if it's coincidence or reaction to the geopolitical situation, but
Now who's being naive?
me, or as some might say, neutral.
Okay.
But I'm literally
No coincidence.
literally, I don't know, and I don't know if you know, Alan. Like it's certainly something to accelerate at this point. So
let's talk about how fun this could get. Do you think that open source maintainers and contributors in the United States would be legally prevented from contributing to this European project?
exactly,
Or
that's,
fork the projects based on sovereignty.
there's the legal issue. There's also, I think, the cultural issue, which is where I was getting at, which is this sort of thing of separate development or separated, projects is inimical to the entire open source enterprise. And so it is a shot across the bow, if you like, to the current geopolitical situation, whether coincidence or not, because it is an organization whose whole mindset for decades, or a culture whose mindset for decades has been one of sharing and collaboration, saying, whoa, not here. We need to have our own thing. That's serious. That's an issue.
So I once had a rabbi give a sermon that coincidence is God's way of showing us he's alive. This is no coincidence. Let's really be clear. This is something that was planned because what the U.S. has done here has been planned. But this goes back to supply chains and COVID. It goes back to the CHIP Act, and it certainly goes to what's been coming out of Washington for the last 3 months. If you are Europe or China or Japan or Korea or Mexico or Canada, you cannot count on anything being done in the U.S. being available to you without strings. The same way, we could you imagine if we produced all the chips in the world, what kind of blackmail would be going on if for countries who wanted chips? You don't think that this can be done with software?
So I have more fun.
Go ahead.
What country does Linus Torvald live in?
Linus?
Not the U.S.
Finland.
Finland.
So
Right, he's finished.
So what happens when he wakes up one morning and decides to, maybe we need a little sovereignty control for Linux too, and maybe he says, hey, you guys outside of this region, you're on your own from now on. Just saying that as a theory.
So here's where if you
But
play
this is
this
where
out,
trade wars go.
yeah, if you play this out, we go from sovereign clouds to S3, not Amazon S3, AWS S3, but sovereign software stacks. That's essentially what we're talking
Yeah.
about. Here's the software architecture for our national presence, whatever that domain is. It's in our interest, financially, security, whatever it is, military interest. And you end up with all these variants of different stacks where today it's, Kubernetes, yes, there are distributions with still Kubernetes, but things start getting forked because we don't want to share this with this country. I mean, it gets down this ridiculous path.
It's counter to the open source project as a whole.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Guys, it's
Great.
bigger than that.
Yeah, it is
The
bigger.
world we all grew up in is the post-World War II world, a world order actually established by the United States. Like you had things like the United Nations and the Anti-Tariff and Free Trade Acts and the World Trade Council, WTC, and the World Court, and all of these institutions that we've grown up that have brought in the greatest years of prosperity that humanity has ever established, that though there hasn't been total peace in the world, there's been less wars and killing in the last 80 years than ever in the history of humanity. You're talking about junking that whole world order because one man might be a foreign agent of another country.
So then you just brought it down to the specific now. And I mean, like,
yeah, it is. It's very specific.
Yeah, so,
that's what's going on here. Let's not get highfalutin, right? People wax poetically about what the Nazi Party was until they got taken away to the chambers.
yes, but this is a time of change. It's a time of, actually, Mitch, you and I were using this word earlier when we were just talking about this show, this sort of, or I used it, which is this sort of chaotic moment. There's a lot of chaos. What we want to do, if we can, is orient everyone. And that's why I'm glad that you brought that up, because, Mike, you're talking about implications. You talk about implications of this kind of move and how it can reverberate. But what you're doing for us, Alan, is you're putting it in this perspective that the world used to have a very protectionist approach to the economy. That was pre-World War II. In fact, it was, something that happened a lot during the Great Depression as a reaction to the Great Depression. And then
it started before the Great Depression.
And during World War II at Bretton Woods and what followed that, all of these economic moves to open up the world economy and ultimately led to the peak of globalization right before the Great Recession. And I think this particular move, NeoNephos, this closing off, this walling off of an open source project, is an example of a pulling back all around the world, led maybe by the United States and by the current administration, pulling back from globalization. And that's what we need to deal with, whether it's just on technology stacks or it's on business or organizational goal.
We just need to develop a vaccine for NeoNephos. Oh, those people aren't in the CDC anymore. Oh, that's not a possibility.
So the whole thing does make me sad.
It makes me incredibly sad.
Let me be more blunt. It's stupid. Not the reaction, but the situation. I totally get why EU would do this. Yeah, it's true. I'd be like, hey, if you're going to be a wild, crazy fall off the end of the earth, we don't know which side because you think it's flat. We think it's round. We're going to build a round world. You go live on your flat U.S. Earth, right?
Let me be clear. Today the EU, tomorrow the world.
Well, yeah.
I think the world is, and a lot of, to his point, has already done this. I think China has its own sovereign cloud kind of mindset in play. I think we're already seeing the balkanization of this whole structure. But I wonder the following.
Go ahead.
Will individual people, follow the rules, or will they say, screw it, we're part of this open source community, it's bigger than all of you countries, and we're going to work together whether you like it or not, unless you're going to come and actually arrest me for writing code?
They got plenty of masked men.
No.
Apparently they'll pick you up off the street, so yeah.
With masked men.
Fingers off the keyboard. I don't know why not.
Look, I think you're right. We're in a little bit of a chaos time. But a new nature abhors a vacuum. Mm-hmm. And a new world order will emerge. Maybe without the U.S., certainly without the U.S. at its help.
Action, there's an opposite and equal reaction.
Right. And
Newtonian.
You could see China filling that vacuum, partnering with the EU.
I think they already are.
I think globalization may have died, and what we're going to be left with is a lot of international instances of companies. So I'm going to have 10 different arms of the same company that are going to all have different infrastructure because one's in this unit's in Europe and my other unit of Chevron, for example, is in the U.S. and then I got another one in Venezuela or whatever.
Here's the thing. People and countries want to trade. China's going to do business with Europe. Japan is going to do business with Europe. Europe's going to do business with South Korea. Africa they need aid. They're going to do a lot of business with China and Europe, people who are giving them vaccines. Yes, vaccines work. So what you're risking here is really the U.S. being a rogue nation. After all these years of calling North Korea, Iran, a rogue nation.
And it gets worse and we're threatening to slap tariffs on countries that are trading with other countries that we slap tariffs on. So it's just going to escalate out of control.
I think that is the balkanization is an immediate like that, but that I think is a intermediate step towards the emergence of a new world order. Plain and simple.
So I think we're entering into a phase of U.S. could look like China 20, 30 years ago. You wanted to do business in our country? Come build your factory in our country. Maybe the government will own a little bit of it, and we'll put the Alan Schimmel, the czar of partnerships with the U.S. government on your board, right? I mean, I don't want to be too extremist, but I mean, ultimately, if you really want to say, close the border, close the walls, build the wall, right? That's what we look like, because we look like China.
And it's hard to imagine how this all has an outcome that's better for anybody.
Well, when you say it makes you sad, that's the sad part. Who are the losers here? We all are. We all are.
Yeah.
You know, when I was a little boy,
Just yesterday.
When you were thinking about globalization and
well, I wouldn't think about globalization and software. But, you know, I'd watch Star Trek. And what a wonderful world. You had the Russian guy.
Chekhov.
Yeah.
You had the Japanese fellow.
Zulu.
Yeah, I didn't buy into the Vulcan thing. I'll tell you the truth. I didn't think we'd have aliens. But the idea of a world that comes together to do good things, cure cancer kind of stuff and explore space and do things.
I just want to remind you, even in Star Trek, they had the red shirts. They were the one that got sacrificed. The security guys. So,
the security guys always got sacrificed.
exactly.
I thought they were engineers.
Yes, I know. I'm trying to not say that.
I didn't want to tell him that.
Thank you very
It's
much.
personal. But, it's a shame that what instead we're going to have is just a race of all these nationalities, countries, territories, regions, trading blocks competing against each other. And I know that's what the present U.S. administration may want, but it's not what's good for humanity.
And we will reinvent the same tech 10 times over for 10 different sovereign clouds.
Yeah.
Each will be done slightly differently. And then
One of the things that you asked was, are people going to follow the rules? Okay? No, they're not going to follow the rules. We know they're not all going to follow the rules. The sad part is the friction that this kind of this broad organizational action, whether it's a government action or in this case a non-governmental organization or even of a large company, that kind of action that puts friction into development, it puts friction into the collaboration. It makes it more difficult. So, and then, of course, this is the mother of all forks, right? Now you have all kinds of comparisons and they're doing this, maybe we should do it. Do we recreate it? Where do we get it from? That increase in chaos.
there will be an underground software development community that will be actively resisting, and they will prefer to work together.
I hope so.
Someone in Russia will steal the American code for Kubernetes, and we'll get something that looks like really close to a Kubernetes in Russia, just like the space shuttle and the Russian version of it. I'm serious. Think about intellectual property, right? Yes, there's laws between countries, and we deal with that issue today. It's not like it is with China, where it's like open season on anybody's intellectual property. They're great at copying stuff. That's what they do really well. Is that a future that we're headed towards, where I don't really give a crap?
It's the breakdown of the world. So what you guys are talking about is world order. It's a breakdown of the world order and everything that goes with, right? Geneva Conventions, International Court of Justice, war crimes.
I'm gonna steal code too, right? More aggressively. I mean, there's gonna be more espionage because people are gonna be
There
like,
are.
it's gonna be like, I remember I'm in Germany and I'm walking down and through this military museum they have, and I turn the corner and there's a VAX computer system. It was a knockoff of the one that Digital built back in the day, and the East Germans had reversed engineered it and built their own.
Yeah.
And that's how they kind of did it, and we're just going to see more and more of that.
Until we steal theirs.
I will say this. You said globalism is dead or something like that.
Globalization. Yeah.
It's not dead. It's going into hibernation. These things swing back and forth.
I hope so.
So,
I
you know,
hope so.
it could be dead as far as we're concerned because maybe the return will be, you know, after we're done and gone.
Well, the thing
But
about a return is you never build a supply chain the same way it was when it was.
You can't.
Same thing with, you're not going to build the same world order that we have today or globalization that we have today. It'll be something different. Maybe it'll have some of the characteristics of it, but we
Which
won't
makes you
return
think-
to that.
maybe in the next segment, we'll talk about how AI is going to save us.
I think that's
What do you say?
That's who our overlord is, actually.
The oligarchs are already trying to take over AI. They already have. I'd like to talk about that.
Yeah.
Soylent Green.
Okay, let's take a break here on Techstrong Gang. We're going to be back, and what are we talking about, Mike?
Talking about the latest Cloud Native Computing Foundation research on adoption of technologies like Kubernetes.
Seems so mundane compared to this, but we're watching Techstrong Gang.
You'll be surprised.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Hey folks, we're back in the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, CNCF, the host of this fabulous event that we're at, puts out their annual research, or I think it's now semi-annual, and they're talking about, well, adoption of cloud native technologies and Kubernetes in particular. Now, it might come to you as a surprise that a lot of folks have Kubernetes clusters as that survey, but there was a couple of interesting points in here that I think will get your attention. One is 24% said that all of their application development and deployment now is cloud native. That's heading up to a rapid point. And then the growth rate of organizations that were adopting CI/CD platforms year over year increased 31%. So there's clearly a fundamental shift happening in the way software is built. And we've been talking about this for years in terms of it's coming, but I feel like looking at the research data, it's here in spades now. And then the question becomes this: how long will it be before the number of workloads that I'm running is greater than the number of cloud native workloads I'm running is greater than my legacy monolithic workloads? And then at what point do I shift the way I think about managing IT? Because up until now, like, the Kubernetes clusters people were in the corner over there somewhere managing this stuff with a DevOps team on their own. And if this stuff starts to go mainstream, the whole IT world is going to be different.
Well, keep in mind, we're rebuilding. It's kind of Kubernetes is flowing upstream. And cloud native. We're rebuilding the tool chains and the workflows into cloud native technologies that we then develop software on top of. So we're now leveraging this, kind of eating our own dog food, if you will. So it isn't just that so many people are adopting CI/CD. Like, we have some other previous research that said, how many CI/CD platforms do you have or products? Are you still looking to replace those? Actually, the numbers are pretty high on people looking to replace what they have as well as look for new. But I think underlying all this is, how do you move everything onto a Kubernetes-based workflow substrate that supports all of this? So that changes fundamentally all the scripts and all the, baling wire and gum we use to patch things together to make it work. Not discounting the quality of it. You know what I'm saying?
And there's another hidden gem in the CNCF numbers. So we talk about CI/CD like it's one thing, but increasingly people who are running into Kubernetes are going, CI and CD are separate. They're like, the CI scripts that we use don't really work in a declarative Kubernetes environment where you're trying to continuously update it. So you're seeing the rise of things like Argo as a separate CD platform that's loosely coupled to CI, but this notion of using CI scripts to drive CD is, as far as they're concerned, dead.
You don't deploy automatically. Most companies don't go straight from CI into deployment.
Yet 43% of people, of organizations, are still using Jenkins for CI/CD.
All right.
It's a large
That may be
still
a, what do you call that, a trailing indicator? Yeah.
Yes, but here's the thing. What is the thing? Here's the thing. This to me is not radical or news. This is pure crossing the chasm. Right? We were at that 15% early adopter stage for, shoot, Atlanta's 10 years of KubeCon. We've been at that early adopter stage for 8 or 9 years.
Sure.
And now we've crossed from 15% to 24, 25%, which means we're just at the beginning of the early mainstream, not the later mainstream. We still have a lot more to go.
Yeah.
To quote Churchill, it's the end of the beginning. Is that
The end of the beginning, or the beginning, but not the beginning of the end.
right?
Well, let's not conflate Kubernetes and DevOps and that sort of thing, right? So unless the study says so, and you're the expert on the study at this point, not outside of the CNCF. My point is this: I think it was 5-6 years ago, Google demonstrated hosting a 4 terabyte database in a container, and some level of mobility. I mean, 4 terabytes in the other certain, especially 6 years ago. There's a lot of, or let's say, shouldn't say a lot. There's certainly a movement more towards hosting everything within containers and Kubernetes.
I think that's the default.
Because of the operational fluidity it provides.
Yeah.
And if it's a monolith or an ancient monolith or whatever it is, I mean, that's one of the nice things about containers is that you can create them in to meet the specifications that you need, provided the infrastructure can support it, and you can go with that. So
I have more fun on that, though. So Red Hat is over here talking about this. So you're talking about stateful applications in containers. You can run them on Kubernetes, and those are like databases and that kind of stuff. And that's gained a fair amount of traction in the last few years. But now Red Hat's over there saying, hey, all these AI workloads out there, they behave radically differently from all the existing database structures that are out there. And the way we've been managing data needs to fundamentally change, and it's going to be a lot more dynamic. And their point was, we're not prepared to manage data at that level of dynamism.
I agree with that.
In the current. Right?
Oh, data gravity has been a serious issue for containerization.
And we talked about data as gravity, and I think the point is data and code are kind of now intermixed, right? When you talk about LLMs and or machine learning for that matter, because you're grooming algorithms, you're grooming data for the algorithms. It has a different kind of frequency that it operates in terms of developing that and pushing it out through a pipeline and into production. That doesn't quite fit the software iterative pipeline in the same way. So I think we've got some, how do you make these two frequencies work together? Because they do need to coincide with some deployment at different times. But I think to your point is the data that we're driving this from, whether it's front-ended in RAG or it's in the back-end in models or secondary databases, we're getting ready for that to take the next level of explosion of the amount of data that we're accessing.
And managing that's going to be like a friggin' nightmare we're not quite ready for.
So, first of all, let me say this. The adoption rate for DevOps, I think, is much higher
Very nice.
than the adoption rate for Cloud Native.
Yeah.
Secondly, one of the themes, I've been stuck here at this table doing interview after interview after interview now for 2 days.
For you, I feel bad for you.
It's hard, especially in these chairs. But that being said, a theme that I've heard over and over again from the people I've spoken to is that Managing Kubernetes at scale is the issue of the day here.
Yeah.
Do that.
Yeah.
Right? And we have Microsoft's coming out with a Windows interface for it. This one's coming out with an AI for it. These guys behind me here got another thing. Everybody wants to be able to manage Kubernetes at scale. Tells me two things. Number one, no one really has a great solution. Otherwise, these other ones would go away. And number two, it's a real problem. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And I would say, what's the greatest obstacle for that 24% to turn to 77%? Managing Kubernetes at scale.
I do not disagree. But I do feel like I have been like in a play, like waiting for Godot for Kubernetes now for like 8 years.
And it's finally starting to come in.
I'm
Starting out.
like-
Hey, Godot, how you doing?
I feel like, well, we've gone from
That play would be completely ruined if Godot ever showed up.
We've gone from Kubernetes as something you do for cloud native applications, right? And initially microservices, now it's any kind of workload. But it's really become part of the infrastructure layer, the stack that's the infrastructure. That's one of the things I see here. We've talked about like how big can KubeCon get, how big can CNCF get. It feels like to me there's really kind of two. Let's talk about infrastructure, because infrastructure, people want to create things that you can build and run anything on, right? And you got developers that like, I want to abstract that away. I want to do the things that I want to do, whether it's AI or the latest software architecture. And it's kind of conflating those two things together in one show. You don't usually have one company that does both. There are some, the OpenStack plus development tools, there are some, but a lot of it is like, which bit do you go to? Are you a red or a green?
So this new joining of the Open Infrastructure Foundation with the Linux Foundation, I think is a reaction in some ways to
The open infrastructure, the infra.
Infra is now an arm of the Linux Foundation.
Right. Yeah, no, I know that.
Yeah.
But it's the cloud stack people.
I use the full name. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, CloudStack Open. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
OpenStack.
Yeah. On stage this morning at the show, at the keynotes, the Apple engineer, who was part of a little discussion with an engineer from Cisco and one from Adobe, she highlighted multi-cluster management and infrastructure provisioning, as two areas that need attention and investment right now.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. You're echoing something that's been on my mind, especially during this show, but for a little while, which is we talk about this, we think about this, and a cloud native, we think of it in developer and application development terms, but weren't you just saying to me that there's just so much focus here on infrastructure operations, infrastructure management?
Mm-hmm. And it's important. That's a whole different domain than building applications, whether it's with AI or not.
No, but infrastructure sexy again. We see it. That's why we launched Techstrong.it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Infrastructure sexy is
being remade. Now Kubernetes.
Absolutely.
I always thought it was good looking myself, but
Yeah, I was going to say, that means you and I are sexy
You're like
again.
that.
We're finally having infrastructure week. That's what you're saying. This is infrastructure.
Yeah, we're going to take a break before Mike gets himself in trouble. We're here at KubeCon. We've got more Techstrong, gang. Hold on.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
all right, folks, we're back with our third block, and as we discussed earlier, technology is not immune from cultural issues, and we're here at KubeCon, and people are talking about DEI initiatives and things like that, and you would think that, this being Europe, that none of these issues would find their way here based on what's going on in the U.S. But lo and behold, we're having a bit of a controversy here over this. And Alan, walk us through it.
So I am the social conscious of the gang, aren't
You are? Oh,
Yeah.
thank God somebody is.
Thank God. Anyway, here's where I am on this. And you guys could agree with me or not. You're all free to take your own opinion. Whether it's politically correct in the U.S. or not, DEI is the right thing to do for a lot of reasons. All one has to do is walk around this conference of 12,000 plus people or any other tech conference to see why we need DEI. Why is it 80% white males? As the four of us here are. Why don't I have a person of color here? Why don't I have a woman here? Because I couldn't find one. DEI is a need that's real, and it's not, frankly, just in tech. It's in so much. There's so much that's been done in our culture over the hundreds of thousands of years that there's a reason why we do it. However, in the U.S. at least, we've decided this is no longer a worthy objective. It's no longer a worthy goal. And I say in the U.S., not in the entire U.S., but by the U.S. government has decided this. And so they have issued, not Congress, mind you, not the judicial branch, but the executive branch, has put out some executive orders which are of dubious enforceability, that to remove all references to DEI in our education, in our public works, in our government websites and so forth. And what they've done, let's face it, has been frankly disgusting.
Our educational
Taking down
institutions.
heroes of this country because they were black or women, firing career-long military people because they were black or women and they decided they weren't good enough for the role. That's nonsense. But it gets worse. Because what they've done is they're pressuring American companies to go along with this brown shirt fascism. And it reared its head here in Europe.
At this conference.
At this conference, because the CNCF has always promoted DEI. They have 4 or 5 groups within that DEI umbrella that they promote. One is the hard of hearing and deaf people. We've interviewed them here. Amazing group of people. The I always get my initials wrong. I apologize. LGBTQ community. Like we're still fighting about this. Get out of people's bedrooms. Number 3, women. Why don't we have more women in tech? And number 4, people of color and other minorities. Again, one just has to look around here to see for yourself what it's about. Now, it's one thing if you've got a bad apple in government who's doing it. But when you start using that as leverage to pressure companies, it's trouble, as I said. Now, they have a DEI meeting here of the DEI group, and folks at the meeting are told they're not allowed to take a picture of Google's logo, because though Google paid money to sponsor that DEI thing, I guess that came in before they got their marching orders from their Führer-in-Chief, they gave the word that they didn't want their logo or named used or associated with DEI. Shame. Shame on Google. Shame on you. You were willing to write the check, but you won't have your name on it? What does that make you? What does that make you? That's terrible. But it goes beyond that. Some of the folks in that community wrote to the CNCF and said, we need you now. We need you to come forward and say, we support DEI initiatives. Crickets from the CNCF and Linux Foundation. Shame on you. Shame on the Linux Foundation. Shame on CNCF for not coming forward and saying, yes, we support our DEI initiatives. We support our communities. It goes beyond here, though, and technology. the biggest law firms in our country, and you know lawyers, I know lawyers. We don't kowtow and give in. That's when we fight. The biggest law firms in our country have, rather than incur the wrath of our totalitarian government, have decided to do tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of pro bono legal work to further the aims of this administration, rather than give in to DEI. And these law firms were picked, specifically called out by EO, which generally
Executive order, just so, yeah.
right, yeah.
Right.
But generally, when you call out a specific firm, not a class, it gets thrown out in court if you have a real court. And they've decided to just bend the knee. I'm telling you, this is Germany, 1933. If you don't stand up and speak out, you're not going to have a chance to do it later. We need the leaders of our corporations. We need our tech giant corporations. We need our leading law firms. We need each and every one of you to stand up and speak out. You think you lost a job to someone because they were a woman or a person of color? Perhaps you did. But I guarantee you that those people and their people have been through more. But if we don't stand up and speak out, and we let this administration intimidate and bully and run over what makes America America, we will have no America.
Yeah.
And so I'm up in arms about this.
Yeah, my point on it too is like it's extending into the corporate world where these companies should have the right to do what they want to do.
Absolutely.
And they're clearly feeling intimidated into one step versus another. And it's one thing for the administration to do what it's doing. I wouldn't agree with it, but at least, they ran on that and there's no surprise there. But on the side where they're like now extending that out to individual corporations to pressure them to behave a certain way is, as they say here, beyond the pale.
Absolutely.
Can I back this up a little?
Go ahead.
To the DEI question. This is a personal issue to me. So it's even worse. How you characterize it was as an anti-DEI initiative by the current United States administration, because that's how the administration characterizes. But what is it really? What is it really? It is a statement that anyone who wants to accuse and be suspicious about someone who is not like them getting a job, getting an honor, getting promoted, getting an opportunity, if they want to blame that on that person's background, they're now allowed. They're allowed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's what this is about.
Yeah,
It's not really eliminating DEI because it's not needed anymore or because it's prejudicial against a group or any of that other sort of thing. It's so that when someone like myself in my position can go and say to themselves, I wanted that, I didn't get it, look who got it. It must be because of their background. It must be because of whom they were born as. It must be because of their feelings or their position.
Yeah.
I am getting official support for that. Not just official support, I'm getting the power to go and say, take them out.
The problem is with it,
That's poisonous. That's poisonous.
It's
poisonous
anti
to
everything
society.
that we.
It's poisonous to America,
people.
the American brand.
Yeah.
So I think the problem is that we've elevated it to a top-level political issue. Like abortion became a top-level political issue in the 80s, right? And it polarized America. Now, meritocracy is used as the opposite of DEI. So you can't have a meritocracy if you have DEI. So we must have to get rid of DEI. That's the blame factor. And it's to me, it's kind of the fighting back of, you can talk about whether it's white males or racist or what might all be behind it. But I think it's really part of tearing down the infrastructure, tearing down the norms of our society and advances that we've made, and creating the chaos that you talked about at this conference that's happening, in our political world and even and in our lives, in our work lives. So I don't really give a shit what the government thinks about if I like DEI or not. The president of whatever company I work for, I hope they don't really give a shit either. But the problem is the tech bros have stepped in and said, oh, great, let's change our policy around monitoring, and we've been too aggressive about monitoring the content on our sites. That's bullshit. They're just kowtowing to either curry favor or avoid consequences from the government. That's not right.
Yeah, and I want everyone to be suspicious about the story that is being told, or the stories that are being told, the reasons and justifications being given. When we repeat that language, we can, even if we are arguing against it, we are allowing that story to continue.
Understood.
The story here is, I grew up thinking I deserved something. I'm not getting it.
So it's not my fault.
It's not my fault.
Yeah.
And let's be realistic. There are lots of things that you deserve that you don't get, no matter what your background is. That's life.
To his point, though, the meritocracy that we're talking about is stacked, right? It's leaning into a particular viewpoint that says, and this is our definition of meritocracy.
Not really a meritocracy.
Really a meritocracy.
Right.
It's not a meritocracy. You
Right.
fire a 4-star general to bring a 3-star general into a job that's only available to 4-star generals because the 4-star general was black and the 3-star guy is out of central casting, according to the idiot in chief. Mitchell, I've never heard you curse on Techstrong Gang before, so I know how upset this makes you.
Yeah, it is. It's. I think we're destroying the fabric of our society, of what makes us human, and we're demonizing people for whatever reason you choose.
Maybe we should just stay here and not go home.
Maybe. But wait, but this only exists because I don't even think the people who are saying it believe it. They just know that they can get votes saying it.
They can get votes. Well, no, I think
I think they
ultimately
believe it.
there
I
are
think
people
this
who
one they
believe it.
I think this one they believe, Mike.
They
I think there
believe
are lots
it.
of things they don't believe that they say.
But
I
again,
think this one-
the key here is stand up, speak out. If you don't stand up and speak out about this, you're guilty by
Your chance to
association.
do it might be gone.
And I'll close it with this, and I closed my Shimmy Says with this day. I had the writing, I don't have it in front of me now. But you know that old quote, when they came for so-and-so, I wasn't them, so I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And when they came for the next one, and until they came for me and there was no one.
Yeah.
I'll leave it with that. All right. Techstrong Gang, we're live in KubeCon. We'll be here tomorrow. I'm done.